Hello, hello, and welcome back to another episode of Creating Space. We are very excited to be back after a little break. We were all fighting off the sickness in our household for the last couple of weeks, and I think everyone can relate to that these days. It's going around, and so we're really excited to be back.
Yeah, I mean, the silver lining of that is we're very fortunate to work from home and run our own business. And I am always reminded of that when our son gets sick. This was a doozy. I think a lot of people have been getting sick lately, and definitely a week and a half, 2 weeks of him being sick. And then eventually it caught up to us. You do start to feel a little stir crazy. So it's good to be back to routine and being able to do things like this. I'm really excited about the podcast today. So it's great to be back.
Yeah. And so one of the things that just happened in this time that we were off was the Four Nations hockey tournament.
Yeah, the Four Nations face-off.
Face-off.
Yes.
And that, my friends, is exactly why I will be doing mostly the asking of questions in today's episode and having our sports marketing expert over here guide the conversation.
Well, as I said, I am excited about this one. I am a big sports fanatic. It's always been a big part of my life. And honestly, I bring a ton of my experience in sports and coaching to even some of the ways we run our business. But also as a marketer, I do love the marketing aspect of sports. It's really prevalent in sports. And I think this event that just happened was such an interesting and unique one, and really did have some really cool key takeaways that I noticed. So I'm excited to dig into it. I think it was awesome.
Yeah, I'm excited as well. I also do love and enjoy sports. I don't know nearly as much about it as Steve, and I often misquote things, as you just heard, but I do love it. And I mean, even when I was a kid, I really wanted to be a professional sports photographer because I loved great moments in sports and just how they'd always happen and just the amazing feelings that surrounded it. And I wanted to be able to capture that. So I can relate to a lot of the reasons why people really love sport.
Wow. And when I was coaching minor league football, what a treat it was that you were able to photograph the kids playing, and they had such professional photography. And just like you're saying, it evokes a ton of emotion, and there's something about it. I know for me, it's honestly entertainment. It provides an escape, whether I'm playing it, right? It's like an actual physical release for me, and you also get to bond with other people with similar interests, and watching it gives it that type of break too. Like, life can be heavy, and so for some people it's sports, some people find that connection and entertainment other places as well. But like I said, there is interesting marketing. You did make me think of, though, honestly, you didn't even mess up the Four Nations name there. But again, we all have different things. And while our son was sick, we just watched the Harry Potter series multiple times with him. That's a different type of entertainment, and people can equally dive in and be into something like that. And it did remind me of us going to Harry Potter World and me trying to fit in back in the day when we were younger with you and our friends, and pretending that I was as big of a Harry Potter fan as everyone else. And instead of messing up the Four Nations name, I called Draco Malfoy Jacob Malfoy. And that is something that still is, people don't let me live down amongst our friend group. So
we can't forgive you for that one.
Yes, and we can't all be passionate about the exact same things. Although I will say, I've watched it enough times now. I think I love it as much as you guys. But
we'll see. We'll do another podcast about Harry Potter marketing, and we'll see what happens.
You know what? That'd be it's probably pretty interesting to unpack. There's a lot there. And I think even with the sports, very simply, one of the things that I notice that sports brings out in people is that when we buy things, I was once taught anything that we buy or purchase is so that we can fit into a certain group, right? Like in life, the brands we buy, the things we do, they're trying to tell a story about us, and we're trying to fit into a certain group. Being a fan of a sport, or wanting to be part of that sporting community, or a fan of a team in particular, even down to the players or individuals you like, it's all in that same kind of concept of you want to fit into something. And, I'm a Leafs fan, born and raised in Toronto. I mean, that is its own. You're very much part of this specific culture of going through years of pain, feeling like it's you against the world of other hockey fans, and us moving to the east coast of Nova Scotia, man, that was very illuminating for me to be like, oh, wow, not everyone loves the Leafs. Like all my friends and family that I grew up with, in fact, were quite hated as Leaf fans anywhere outside of Toronto. You know, for better or worse, that's kind of your group and who you cheer for and who you're trying to belong with. And so there's a lot of marketing that can speak to that I think is super interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's get into that a little bit. And when it comes to this tournament in particular, what are some of the things that really stood out to you about how the tournament itself was marketed? You know, did they do anything particularly well?
Yeah, this tournament in particular was really interesting. I think I mentioned that maybe not. It's been a long time since there's been an international tournament in hockey. It's been 9 years since the last time they played. And this specific tournament wasn't actually done by the normal organization, the IIHF, who runs international hockey. This one was put on by the NHL. So in many ways, it was just like a fabricated event. They just made this one up because they wanted to have a best of the best tournament. It was 4 nations, Canada, the U.S., Sweden, and Finland all playing. So actually, there's many parts of the world that are great at hockey that were left out for different political reasons right now. Like Russia doesn't have a team. They obviously have some of the best hockey players in the world. But again, this wasn't Olympics. This was the NHL saying, hey, it's been forever since there's been international hockey. We want to put this on. We want to put a lot of marketing behind it and try to see if it can get legs. Leading up to this tournament, we're very much like, hey, is this just a glorified all-star game?
Right.
In sports, across all the major sports, all-star games are starting to become much more just not what they used to be. Like they're just, the athletes generally don't try. They don't play very hard defense. It's not cool to do that, especially the NBA. That all-star game was going on at the same time as this tournament. Become one of the worst ones. Like the dunk competition used to be huge. Being a Toronto fan, Vince Carter did one of the best dunk competitions ever. Back then, the All-Star game, it was still something people were pretty interested in. Now the fans, like literally the commentators say it's a bad product. It's like leading up and during the game. And so
Can I ask why that is?
It is kind of like what I was talking about. Like basketball as a different sport, it's already getting challenged a little bit with a lot of the stars taking time off. They call it load management during the regular season. The guys don't want to get injured. And then when it comes to the All-Star game, like this season in particular, LeBron was supposed to play at the last second, said, I'm not playing. Like the guys just don't care. They show up, they play. It's boring. Even though you'd think, hey, we're getting all the best players together to showcase their skill. When the skilled players aren't trying, it's not captivating, right? Like you need that essence of we're playing for something, which kind of segues into what this tournament was about.
Right. So what's different than, again, about this tournament?
Yeah. So leading up to this tournament, people were having these same questions, right? And so no matter what the NHL was doing, kind of trying to market it as best on best, it doesn't matter if the players don't try. So what was unique about how some of the marketing of this played out and the experience of the tournament is that there happened to be some really unpredictable circumstances with the president of the United States, with Donald Trump, making these comments about wanting to turn Canada into the 51st state. And as well as that, a lot of these tariff conversations and implications that have been going back and forth between two countries that have always been allies. So those events have really fueled the attention and the marketing, and even particularly, even though it's the 4 nations, that the U.S. and Canada were going to be playing and trying and playing for something, playing for like a national type of pride. And in that, I think to really tie it to the marketing, sports can be such an amazing opportunity for a brand to capitalize on. There's these very cultural, socially relevant things going on that's kind of like lightning in a bottle. and they can now connect their brand to it and try to be a part of that conversation. One thing that I've noticed is even just, we love a good meme. We did this with some of our clients and saw tremendous success over the last couple days, is you could get very easy engagement by just not even needing to be super on the fence of one side or the other of where you stand in the like political conversation, but just making some content to open that conversation. Well, because people are so divided and polarized, which is always a good thing in marketing, they're far more likely to engage and to have a conversation. And they do all the work in terms of amplifying that post, right? Or that marketing. That engagement piece is so difficult often. And so when times like these present themselves as a brand, you can very, very much leverage it by just thinking creatively about what content you can put out. I mean, for the event itself too, something when this lightning in a bottle, as I mentioned, it comes along, it's like, hey, if I'm a brand like Fanatics who does all the jerseys for the NHL, probably makes sense to really spend some more marketing dollars in this time and tie themselves to this event very clearly. They're also going to just sell, like very practically sell a ton of merch, a ton of jerseys. I know one of the streamers that I love on YouTube, Steve Dangle, they were a sponsor of his streams, and it was so well done. At the end, and Canada wins, he's talking about how awesome the championship hat is that the players are and how many he wants to buy. And then in the comments, somebody mentions they're sold out on the website already. I mean, that is marketing gold, to be able to attach yourself to that. Again, you can't predict when society is going to drive so much extra engagement, but sports can be an interesting thing to kind of tie your horse to, because things like that happen and you can get so much more value on your spend.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that the timing with the political climate is very interesting. And I'm guessing, yes, like this was kind of a coincidence, right? That these two things happened at the same time. But then do you feel like the tournament really started to lean more into this idea of the rivalry, or like hockey rivalries already exist, right? And especially between the U.S. and Canada, and there's already a deep emotion that's attached to it. And then you layer on this political climate on top of it. So do you feel like with all these things going on, that's what people really tapped into?
Yeah, I think the thoughtful brands for sure. I'd have to go back and look. I believe this tournament was planned well in advance of the political charging of it. So again, that I think was a little more circumstantial. Not the first time in sports, though, something like that has happened that really has driven the numbers and the awareness up. I think once it happened, once the first game was played and you could tell the players putting that country's crest on your chest really seems to bring something out in an athlete. It brings out that national pride. I think for the viewers, it reminds them of these nostalgic, patriotic feelings. Once the first game was played, and it wasn't even Canada-US, it was Canada-Sweden, but they could see, hey, this has legs. This tournament, the players are trying and people are interested. You could see just people jumping in, the way that the conversation was changing around it, the build up to U.S. Canada was very much something that you could see and feel, and that conversation was happening everywhere. I mean, that build up to the first time they played, the first game, it led to probably one of the craziest starts to a sports game I've ever seen.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a lot of ways that sports marketing is really unique, and a lot of things that teams themselves tap into, as well as businesses and brands. And one of those other things is nostalgia, right?
Yeah.
And I think that was definitely prevalent in the marketing around this as well. Can you tell us a little bit about how we saw nostalgia at play, whether it was, within Team Canada itself, or where you might have seen that in the marketing?
Well, one, in terms of brands attaching themselves to a moment or an experience, the thing about the nostalgic side of sports is there's certain games you remember where you were when they happened,
Right.
you know, and when your team won or even had a really bad loss. And I think for a brand to be able to be a part of that experience for you is something that is like going to innately be remembered and is a unique opportunity. The other nostalgic side of it too is, as a human, these big memories you have if you're a sports fan that you relate back to. And I think even on the personal brand of the marketing, it's really cool to see. Like, as I mentioned, that first game between the U.S. and Canada, I'd never really seen a hockey game start like this. There's two brothers called the Kachuk brothers for Team USA, Matthew and Brady, and they're both sons of an old famous NHLer, Keith Kachuk. And literally their dad had a fight in a similar tournament against Team Canada, against Claude Lemieux. And these brothers were able to see, like, this shows the current athlete and the power of personal branding and social media and where their heads are at. They literally planned to fight back to back to start the Canada game because they knew, yes, it was going to have very practical use for their team and the crowd in terms of trying to fire up their own team and show, hey, we're in Canada's house today and we're going to be the Americans and the tough guys and we're here to win. Also, I think they are smart enough that was like, hey, we do this. This is going to kind of help cement our own legacy, our own personal brands, build us into kind of these legendary type of figures within the game. And they already do a really great job outside of the game. Amazing social media marketing from influencers in hockey, working and collabing with the athletes, doing like co-created social posts. The NHL Europe, just amazing posts of having the players come out and pronounce their names to the camera. So the Finnish guys saying exactly how you actually pronounce their names instead of how we anglicize them here in Canada and North America. The Swedish team doing it. Hilariously then having like the Canadian team do it and they just say their names how we say it all the time. Just like really, really creative personal branding, social media marketing, and a million examples that I thought were awesome to see.
Yeah, I think that what really stands out to me and what I'm hearing you talk about is this idea of storytelling, which is so huge in all forms of marketing. But particularly in the sports marketing narrative, there is this story. There's the story of the tournament, but under that, there's the story of the countries. There's the story of the relationships between those countries, but then also of the individual players. And there's such a mix when we're putting countries of players together that some of them are newer, some of them are older, some of them we know really well, some of them we haven't quite heard of. And there's these storylines that are also attached to them, and people really connect with those players, right? And they want to be a part of this storyline, or like you said, these kind of great moments, and people want to attach themselves to those narratives.
Hugely. And you asked me before too, like, how does a brand take advantage of that? And it makes me think of, there's this guy that I love that I follow on social media. His name's Jordan Rogers, and he used to work for Nike in their branding department. Now he has this really cool personal brand where he specifically talks about sports marketing and even teaches people like, hey, if you wanted to get a job in sports marketing, here's my advice. But he often speaks about this framework for brands, which is where they're essentially looking for these four things, right? So it's like you have this moment, four nations face off. And if you have the ability to be agile, you see it's picking up a lot of steam and interest, right? Well, now you start looking for like the hero will be the next piece. So this is what you're talking about. Now there's like a personal stories and athletes and people that you could attach your brand to. So you have the event, the hero. Well, now you have the message, right? Like, what's your message? What's the storytelling that you're going to look and leverage during this time with the individual and with the event? And then he teaches you want to actually now lean into what is like the medium that it's on. And these days, there's a lot of different ones. So like I mentioned, this other streamer that I like, or YouTuber, like tons of opportunity. And maybe that's where you go and attach yourself as the brand. And so I think you kind of look at that matrix and think about it as a marketer. You can really start to think about as a brand, hey, when these opportunities are coming along, maybe I can use this framework to kind of attach myself and tell an amazing story and do some really, really deep, cool marketing and take advantage of these opportunities that don't come along every day.
Can you just repeat that framework for us? So it's...
Yes. So I might mess up the order here again, and it's not totally relevant. It's just that these 4 pieces are considered.
Okay.
So you're going to have a moment, right? So this is a sports moment that you're looking for. You're going to have the hero, probably an athlete, but it could be like in many cases, there's a lot of, in sports especially now, there's a lot of influencers and creators that are adjacent to the sport. Could be that, but generally is going to be an athlete. So we have the moment, the hero, we have the message, right? So this is kind of like the campaign, the story we're telling, and then the medium, right? Which is where we're telling that story. He gave a great example. He's really into golf. So another one would be Tiger Woods with the new indoor golf league, and then his brand Sunday Red. And so when the first time Tiger came out, they were very much ready, and he came into the parking lot wearing this very cool planned hoodie, right? And so they essentially used that framework, and he showed how they did to blow up the sales for this like particular hoodie that he was wearing. And
right.
It was kind of this iconic campaign around him having like the hoodie tucked in, which was like kind of this awkward style, but it was cool the way they did it, right? And caught a lot of attention. So that would be another example again, where you can kind of take these 4 quadrants as a brand and try to find the sweet spot of how you can really create some marketing magic.
So how can smaller businesses and brands also weave themselves into that? Because I think a lot of times people see marketing around these kind of great moments in sports or whatever's happening. I mean, we can even take that framework could apply outside of sports as well. But people might be thinking, well, big brands often take these opportunities because they have the budgets to actually attach themselves to these huge players and to these teams and these tournaments. How could a smaller business or brand find their way into this narrative?
Yeah, I love the question. I mean, for me, I'm not going to lie. One of my favorite things, and I think still works the best, and I believe that Nike probably started this, and it's been the best way to market something ever since, is in sports, is that you get your product on one of the best athletes, most marketable athletes, and the fans of that athlete are just going to buy it. Like that is just one of the easiest ways. It does so much for the product and the brand to align with the athlete.
Right. But you probably have to have like a pretty good budget.
It's one of the most expensive things you can do in marketing.
Yeah.
So that isn't available to every brand. And so to answer your question, I think it falls more in line to some of what we were talking about before. You know, social media is very powerful, and being creative in your use of how you can attach and drive conversation and be a part of these communities and groups is really like one of the lowest hanging fruits that you can take advantage of. There's no reason you can't still use that type of framework I talked a little bit in that type of thinking and marketing. Again, we love a good meme. It could be as simple as that, and just trying to get some virality and more eyeballs on your account or your brand during that time. But also what's newer now too is there's so many creators in sports, especially like golf is awesome for it. There's some bigger ones, but there's also tons of micro creators that are great, like gaining a ton of momentum and steam. Hockey, as we're talking about here, there are just some hilarious accounts that are still up and coming that you could look and try to align with. They do some of the best brand marketing. Like if you're funny and you're making funny content, that's some of my favorite. And you know, it says it's a sponsored ad, but the person's so funny that it's still good content, right? And it's like you laugh at it, and again, you're like, you know what? Hey, this brand has a sense of humor. Like, I'm into that. I actually don't even mind getting this ad, and I like the creator. So that's maybe like some of the easier ways that you can start thinking about it. or even learn from those creators and see if you can dip your toes in creating that type of content for your brand.
Does it make sense for any business to try to attach themselves to these moments? So like if there is a sort of major moment in sports happening and we're seeing this as this big opportunity, should just like every and any brand go for it? Or is there an importance to having kind of a direct alignment, like you have a sports brand and so you should align with it? Or could a skincare brand try to find a way?
I mean, just if you look at the ads when you watch the Super Bowl and they're paying crazy amounts of money, they know that that sporting event is so marketable. It's not just even football fans, never mind just football players watching it. Vast demographics of people will tune in for the Super Bowl. Those are, again, some of the most expensive ads you could possibly imagine. But I'm more speaking to the fact that if those brands know that it doesn't necessarily need to be a sports product to get value. In the end, you're trying to get eyeballs and you're trying to attach yourself to something that has memories and nostalgia. And so I would argue, yeah, if you can get involved in those conversations, I'm sure outside of a few brands where it might be very, very little of your demographic watching, there's probably a good amount of your demographic watching. And so as long as you think that that is the case, I'd say yes. If it feels aligned, you could think of it that.
Again, on an even smaller scale, like the people who are likely listening to this right now, they would more be thinking like, should I be posting about this? Should I be trying to make one of these hilarious memes? I mean, I know what I think, and I think there's ways that you can definitely be creative around trying to tie your brand to the story, but it has to make sense.
Yeah, I appreciate what you're saying. And I think no matter what, and depending on the size of your brand, like if it's just you're a solopreneur, I always still think it needs to feel aligned. It needs to feel good to you. So if you're a solo brand or you're a big marketing department, I still think that deeper brand work of like, maybe it's not a sporting event necessarily for you. It probably comes more to what we were talking about earlier on the episode, which is like when I was joking about Harry Potter versus the Four Nations, like I would still be looking at the principles of finding culturally relevant events and situations that feel good to you or to your target demo and trying to leverage that in some way, no matter what, because I think you would be missing a lot of marketing gold by not considering what that is for your brand. I love sports. I'm biased to sports, and I think there's opportunity for brands. But again, I wouldn't necessarily force a square peg in a round hole around it either, if that feels clear.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Okay, so my last question sort of around this tournament and the marketing is, if you were consulted to do marketing for this tournament, what kind of brand partnerships or campaigns would you have recommended? And do you think there was any industries or brands that really missed the opportunity to tap into this moment?
Yeah, for me, I mean, that question hits directly home, that we're working with and actually taking over a smelling salt company, right? And the smelling salts, I mean, literally the ones that they would use for an athlete when they're knocked unconscious to bring them back to consciousness. But this is more of like a direct-to-consumer brand version of that. Something like that, this kind of comes back to your last question. That is a no-brainer product to attach to something like that. The budget for that would not be one of buying a commercial spot. And we're in digital marketing too. Like, it's funny, a Super Bowl commercial, if you have infinite money, sure, that's awesome. And it would be a nice to have. For me, I think the sweet spot would be more in what I talked about before, is like I'm really seeing the up and coming of the content creators, and then even these situations where the content creators are getting so big that they're starting to actually collaborate with the professional athletes. And then there's some professional athletes that are almost like dipping their toes into the content creation space. So there's becoming these really cool intersections that brands can align themselves to. That's what, like, the opportunities that I personally am loving and would be looking at leveraging. So for Billy's, like the smelling salts, it would be someone like Steve Dangle, who does, who's been in YouTube a long time, but he's always experimenting and doing really interesting new things with YouTube to try to connect with these fan bases. Might be like sponsoring in there, or these guys like Austin Alexander, or who does like these very funny skits about hockey as a creator. Perfect type of person I would love to collaborate with. Or in hockey too, there's these guys like Swaggy P that one of our clients works with a lot, who's a sports equipment company, or Pavel Barber, right? And these guys are just making awesome content. And that's probably where I think you can get a little more bang for your buck, because you can strategically use that reach to run ads and retarget and drive very measurable traffic to your website as well, which you can then retarget with ads and run promo codes, like actually boost your sales in this very practical way. And that's where I am personally kind of excited about using digital marketing right now for brands of that I would say are more kind of medium size or have a little bit of marketing budget.
Cool. Very cool. Well, thank you for diving into so much detail around this tournament and sharing so many of your thoughts. I think there's always some very cool parallels between sports and business and marketing, and it's really fun to kind of walk down that path with you. I know you could probably talk about this for literally ever.
Yeah, it's something I am passionate about. And again, I have some of my fondest memories, but just like we were saying, it's cool for me to now be in business and still get to actually be a part of sports in some different ways and through the marketing side. And it's really, really cool. So also thank you for helping guide the conversation. And I hope it was valuable for everyone.
Absolutely. So we are going to go into our next segment, and we've still been getting some great questions. We're starting to build a little bit of a bank of questions from the mailbag. And so that's our listener Q&A. We ask for you guys to send us in questions, anything you want us to answer. So please continue to do so. You can send us an email, send us a DM. Everything's linked down in the show notes. But for today's question, it comes from actually someone we know and love very well. Tassie on our team sent us a beautiful question. And I love this one. And I think we'll both have some interesting things to share. But what's your favorite part of being a remote agency?
Thanks for the question, Tassie. And yeah, it's funny. I think it is a double-edged sword, but it's actually ironically what I started talking about at the beginning. When our family is sick, we have so much more flexibility than I see some other people with different work. And I'm so thankful for that. And then it goes beyond situations where we're sick. It's just like, I don't feel like I rarely have to miss anything with my son, and with him growing up. We're both often able to be at events together. And I cherish that time. And again, the double-edged sword of it can be a little bit, hey, you need to find other opportunities to get out of the house. It can be very easy to be stuck there, or make sure that your work and life balance, which is so important, people talk about these days. It can be a little bit easier for those things to get meshed together. So that's kind of the trickier parts, but it's so worth it because for us, I think, and for me, definitely all the benefits that come from it. I can't personally imagine going into an office anymore. And
yeah,
don't get me wrong, I miss certain aspects of it, but again, it's far outweighed by the benefits of getting to be home and not miss anything, and that flexibility, which would be my favorite part. How about you?
Yeah, I mean, it's probably about the same thing. And obviously it's a big reason, I think, for us to want to be business owners, to be entrepreneurs, is to really be in charge of the type of lifestyle that we have. But I know extending it just beyond ourselves, my favorite part of that is being able to give it to other people, and to be able to provide that opportunity for people that they also get to have a little bit more say in what their daily schedule looks like, and have that flexibility to be able to be present for the things that really matter and that really are valuable to them. When we first started, we said this, and I continue to say it, that work should never take away from your life. It should really add to it. And when we have to make sacrifices of our time, of our relationships, and things that we really care about, things that we want to prioritize, and then that's work taking away from the quality of your life. And so for me, having this environment that's completely remote, it's being able to give people a work opportunity that really does add to life and make it better. And that's my hope and goal with it. And seeing that in practice, hearing it reflected back to people who work with us, that is my favorite part.
Yeah, thanks for that. It's such a good reminder. Mike mentioned today in our happy hour, I think it was, that how thankful he is for the same things I was talking about, that flexibility. And it is like space creators. It's one of the main reasons that we started it, was not just for that life design for ourselves, but for others. Yeah, thanks for bringing that up, because it's so true. That would be one of my favorite parts as well.
So thanks for that question, Tassie. And like I said, keep on sending us your questions. You can ask us absolutely anything, whether it's marketing related, life related, or everything in between. So keep sending those questions in, and we will definitely get to yours on the show. Last way we like to round this out every time. Steve, what are you creating space for this week?
Yeah, this week was great. I know I mentioned on other episodes that we've been really working hard on processes, and it's been great success. This week was really, really fun for me, where we was able to create space and want to continue to create more of it, to now start to bring in our team that I really respect their input. And as we've kind of been breaking down how things have been working, getting their input to kind of finalize, tweak, and build the rest of these things that we're going to run with for the next quarter. And so just making space for their input, their constructive feedback and ideation on how we can continue to improve. And it's been great, and something I want to continue to make more space for. Because, I really appreciated all their input this week. How about yourself?
I love that. I am creating space from my phone. I have been working on putting more space between me and my phone on a daily basis. Everything from just not scrolling. I have a no scroll rule right now for myself, and that really helps to be spending less time on
how's the no scroll rule work?
Like, I can go onto social to put a post out, but I can't sit and scroll through, doom scroll and endlessly look at content. And it's very interesting, because the less I do it, the less I want to, and the less interesting that I find most things that are on social media. And so that's actually gets easier every single day. I no longer find myself reaching for my phone just to scroll. So that's been a big thing, but then also not having my phone on or around me most of the time.
Physically not having it.
Exactly. Yeah. I can't come into my bedroom at night, because you will automatically reach for it, especially if you can't sleep. It's there. You're going to go on it. So I'm just continuing to work on creating more and more space between me and my phone. And I've already seen huge, huge benefits of that for myself. And so I'm excited to see how that becomes even better.
I love it. I gotta work on that one too. They're very addicting, and cannot say the amount of times I pull my phone out to do something.
Yeah.
And
then you end up,
my goodness,
scrolling.
Yeah, it's crazy. So I'm going to jump on that one with
no scroll zone.
Yeah, the no scrolling. I like it. But I agree with you. I think for me, with how addictive it is, you're going to have actually boundaries around not having it physically on me, because the things are so addictive. It's like you do it without even thinking. So yeah, I love that one.
Awesome. Well, thank you all so much for tuning in with us on this episode of Creating Space. We can't wait to chat with you again soon. Don't forget to send in your questions for the mailbag. And if you get the time, please subscribe to the show, leave us a review. It helps us so much to be able to continue to get this show out and in front of all of the right people. We love you. Thanks for being here, and see you soon.
Go Canada!